The sunlight pierced through the ancient stained-glass windows of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, casting gentle colors over the silent crowd. Every breath was held, every eye focused, every heart waiting. And then, in that sacred silence, history was made. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, son of Manila, now stood as Pope Luis I, the first Filipino pope in history. The moment was not just a crowning of a new pope, it was the birth of a new era. A wave of emotion swept across the basilica as Pope Luis I smiled, a warm, humble, deeply human smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of deep peace, of faith, and of knowing the weight of the world now rested gently on his shoulders. All around him, ancient traditions unfolded. The choir erupted in sacred song. Latin verses soared like angels through the air, echoing off marble columns and holy relics. For centuries, popes have stood in this very place. But this was different. This was not just a European man rising to power in the church. This was a global church choosing a shepherd from Asia, a son of the islands, a voice from the margins. A sign that the Catholic Church was no longer looking inward, but outward, embracing the poor, the humble, the forgotten, and the faithful around the world. Thousands inside the Vatican gasped and cried. Millions watched on screens. And in Manila, the celebration exploded like a supernova. Streets overflowed. People waved flags, clutched rosaries, and cried openly. Church bells rang non-stop. Children danced. Grandmothers clung to their prayer beads. Fireworks lit the sky with colors that could be seen for miles. Strangers embraced. Old wounds were forgotten. For one night, maybe for one beautiful chapter. In time, everyone was family. Because this wasn't just about Luis Tagle. This was about hope. This was about a small colonized country now taking its place at the center of a global faith. This was about a humble man, raised by teachers and market vendors, standing before the world not as a ruler, but as a servant of God and mankind. The people called him Cheto in his youth. Now they called him Pope Luis I, and the tears that streamed down the faces of Filipinos weren't just tears of joy. They were tears of victory, of pride, of relief, of finally being seen. Across the world, people of all colors and faiths took notice. From New York to Nairobi, from Seoul to São Paulo, voices rose in celebration. But what made this moment historic wasn't just Luis's title. It was the way leaders from all major religions came together like never before. Inside the Vatican, the atmosphere was electric. There stood the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem beside the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Dalai Lama smiled softly, offering a Buddhist blessing. A rabbi in a black coat recited Hebrew prayers. Hindu priests murmured chants of peace. Evangelicals and Orthodox bishops stood in silence, watching, humbled. This was a spiritual earthquake, not in violence, but in unity. For the first time in modern history, world faith leaders stood shoulder to shoulder, not for politics or war, but for peace, all in support of the rise of Pope Luis I. It was a moment that said to the world, faith does not have to divide us, it can unite us. And Pope Luis knew it. He didn't bask in applause or wave like royalty. Instead, he bowed, just slightly, just long enough to show that he saw everyone. He understood the moment. And then, in his first public words, he said something that brought the world to tears. "I am not above you," he said gently. "I am with you." The simplicity of that line carried weight. It reminded people of Christ washing the feet of his disciples, of leaders who serve, not rule, of love that listens, not commands. And, with that, Pope Luis V began his reign not with power, but with presence. In the heart of Manila, the celebration never stopped. People hung flags from windows, churches stayed open all night. Families gathered around candles, praying in Tagalog, Ilocano, Visayan. Every language whispered the same thing: "Thank you, Lord." The streets, usually chaotic with honking and rush, became rivers of song. A whole city transformed into a cathedral. A people who had been through colonization, dictatorship, poverty, and countless storms now stood with unshakable joy. Elderly men who remembered wartime cried. Children too young to understand still felt the shift. This was a new page in Filipino history, no, in world history. For the first time, the Church looked to Asia, not as a mission field, but as a leader. The Vatican no longer seemed so far. Faith no longer felt foreign. It was theirs now, shared, honored, alive. And Pope Luis? He was ready. Known for his deep compassion, his time serving in the slums of Manila, and his passionate advocacy for the poor, he wasn't the kind of man who sought attention. He was the kind who listened, who wept with grieving mothers, who hugged street kids, who laughed with prisoners and whispered prayers for addicts. He lived the gospel, not just preached it. His message has always been consistent: love, mercy, and action. And now, as Pope, he would bring that same spirit to the Vatican. Already he began calling for reforms: more transparency, less division, more compassion. Let us not build walls in the name of tradition, he said. Let us build bridges in the name of love. His words weren't just for Catholics, they were for everyone: the religious, the doubting, the angry, the forgotten. He opened his arms wide, not to pull people in, but to walk beside them. God is not distant, he said in his first sermon as Pope. God is near, and we must be near to one another. His speech wasn't a lecture. It was a conversation, a gentle call back to the heart of faith. And all over the world people listened, not just because he wore white robes, but because he spoke from the soul. Even skeptics found themselves curious. Who was this man? Why did he speak of climate, change, of women's dignity, of mental health and technology? Why did he talk about laughter and pain with the same respect? Why did he seem more like a father than a pope? Because he was both: a spiritual father, a brother, a son of the soil. Pope Louis I was the Church's answer to a wounded world. In the coming days, he visited migrant centers, hospitals, refugee shelters. He refused luxury. He asked for humility. He knelt before children. He kissed the hands of the elderly. In every gesture, he reminded the world, this is what leadership looks like. From Muslim villages in Mindanao to Christian parishes in Brazil, from temples in India to churches in Italy, people watched in awe. Global faith leaders continued to applaud his humility. Religious scholars noted the interfaith harmony that followed his coronation. It was not an accident. It was his vision, to bring the world's faiths not into one religion but into one mission: love. And so, a new chapter began. A new dawn for Catholics, a new voice for the voiceless, a new sign that faith can evolve without losing its soul. In the halls of the Vatican, change stirred like a breeze in spring. Young priests and old cardinals alike felt it: not a rebellion, not a revolution, but a renewal, a soft return to truth. And outside, the world responded. Donations to charities rose. Mass attendance in Asia spiked. Conversations about poverty, justice, and hope filled living rooms. Something was awakening. It wasn't just about a Filipino pope. It was about the world finding faith again, not through fear but through tenderness. The Philippines, once colonized, once overlooked, now became the light on the hill. A small nation with a big heart had given the Church a new face, and the Church had given the world a new hope. Pope Louis I, Manila's son, the people's pope, the humble shepherd, had taken the first step of a long journey. But already, the world was walking with him, and perhaps, just perhaps this time, the path will lead not to division, but to unity,